She thought she had lost everything the day her husband walked out. After 7 years of marriage, of believing in him when nobody else did, of pouring herself quietly into his success, he stood in their living room with 2 suitcases and told her he had found someone better. Someone who matched the life he deserved. An upgrade, he called her. Then he left. What he didn't know, what he had never once thought to wonder, was that the quiet woman he walked away from had been sitting on one of the largest private fortunes in the city the entire time. And what she chose to do with that fortune after he left wasn't revenge. It was something far more difficult and far more lasting. Her name was Evelyn Hartwell, but for 7 years her husband had known her only as Evelyn Hart.
To understand why she had hidden her name, you need to understand where it came from. By the time she was 23, Evelyn had already outlived her parents and watched the only person left in her world die in a hospital bed at the top of a building he had built. Her grandfather, Alexander Hartwell, had constructed half the city's skyline. His shipping lines crossed oceans. His hotels carried his crest in 5 countries. His banks had financed men who later told everyone they were self-made. And in his last hours, with machines humming softly beside him and rain beating against the windows, he looked at his only granddaughter with tired, sharp eyes and gave her the most important piece of advice he had. Money is a mirror. It does not change people. It reveals them. Hide your name. Not forever, just long enough to know who loves you without it. A week later, he was gone. A month after that, control of Hartwell Global transferred to a private trust, and the heir quietly stepped away from public life, moving into a modest apartment under the shortened name Evelyn Hart, wearing cotton dresses, driving a 12-year-old sedan that rattled in the rain, making her own coffee instead of buying expensive lattes. Not because she hated wealth, because she had watched people bow to her last name before they ever heard her speak. She wanted to know just once who she was when no one was bowing. She met Michael at a community business workshop. He was wearing a wrinkled shirt and carrying a folder full of proposals no investor had accepted. He spoke too loudly, laughed too nervously, and stayed after the event to stack chairs because the elderly organizer had a bad knee. That was the first thing Evelyn noticed. Not his ambition or his confidence or his face, his kindness, what she believed was kindness. Their love began quietly. Long walks, shared meals, dreams whispered beneath leaking ceilings. Michael wanted status, but Evelyn told herself ambition wasn't a sin. He wanted to prove people wrong, and she understood that hunger. She had spent her own life being measured by people who thought age and gender made her less capable. So she helped him, invisibly. When his first company nearly failed, an anonymous investor appeared. When his loan was denied, a different bank reconsidered. When he needed access to a supplier, the supplier called him first. Michael thought luck had finally found him. Evelyn let him believe it, not out of cruelty, but because she wanted him to stand without feeling indebted to her. She wanted a husband, not a man kneeling before her fortune. For a while, it worked. Then success touched Michael's shoulder, and slowly he became a stranger wearing her husband's face. He began correcting her in public. He told her which dresses looked too plain. He stopped bringing her to business dinners because, as he said once while adjusting his expensive watch, "You don't really fit in with those people." Evelyn had looked at him steadily. And who are those people? He had sighed the way people sigh when they believe they're explaining the world to someone too simple to understand it. People with taste, influence, presence. That night, while he slept beside her, Evelyn lay awake and heard her grandfather's voice. Money is a mirror. The next morning she made breakfast as usual. Then she stepped into the garden and called her chief legal officer. Review every document connected to Michael Hart's companies. The lawyer paused. Is there a problem, Miss Hartwell? Evelyn watched Michael through the kitchen window, frowning at his reflection in a spoon, practicing a smile he was planning to deploy at an executive lunch. Not yet, she said. The storm arrived wearing red perfume and diamonds. Her name was Cassandra. She entered Michael's life at a private networking event. Beautiful, in the deliberate way of women who understood every room was a stage. She laughed at his jokes, touched his arm when he spoke, looked impressed by stories Evelyn had heard 100 times. Unlike Evelyn, Cassandra never seemed content with enough. She wanted the best table, the best wine, the best view. She told Michael he had the aura of a man destined for more. If only he stopped dragging ordinary things behind him. Ordinary things. That was what Evelyn became.
Michael didn't leave all at once. He drifted first.
Late nights, short answers, new cologne, passwords changed on the vices he once left open. Then came the criticism, sharper and more public. You should do something with your hair. Do you have to bring coupons everywhere? Sometimes I feel like I've outgrown this marriage. Evelyn heard those words before he said them, in the way he pulled away from her touch, in the way he smiled at his phone but frowned when she entered a room. So when he finally stood in their living room with 2 suitcases and announced that Cassandra was an upgrade, Evelyn did not scream. She did not beg. She looked at the man she had once loved and saw with painful clarity the shape of his emptiness. On the coffee table between them sat a small silver envelope he never noticed. Inside was an invitation addressed to Evelyn Hartwell, the annual Hartwell Foundation Gala, where she was expected to appear publicly for the first time in years. Michael walked out before the rain started. By morning, the city's wealthy circles had been fed well. He posted photographs with Cassandra on rooftop lounges. He appeared at restaurants Evelyn had quietly helped him afford. He let people whisper that his first wife had been sweet but uninspiring, loyal but limited, the kind of woman men marry before they understand their own value. Once at a charity luncheon, Evelyn overheard 2 women discussing her near the restroom. "Poor thing," one said. "He was always too polished for her." The other laughed softly. "Some women are stepping stones." Evelyn washed her hands, dried them carefully, and walked out without looking at either woman. That evening, she opened the floor safe in her study and removed her grandfather's signet ring. Old gold, engraved with the Hartwell crest. She had not worn it in years. She placed it on the desk beside Michael's abandoned wedding photograph and looked at both of them for a long time. One represented inheritance, the other, illusions. 3 months later, Michael found out the truth by accident. Cassandra had begged him to secure invitations to the Hartwell Foundation Gala, the most exclusive event of the season. He spent weeks calling in favors until a minor associate secured 2 seats near the back. He arrived in a black tuxedo with Cassandra on his arm, her sparkling in silver as photographers captured her angles. "This," she whispered, squeezing his hand, "is where we should have been all along." Michael lifted his chin. Exactly. Inside, crystal chandeliers threw light across hundreds of powerful faces. Mayors, CEOs, judges, investors. The kind of people who don't check prices on menus. Michael barely listened to the host's introduction until he heard, "Tonight we honor the woman whose vision has expanded the Hartwell Foundation into the largest private charitable network in the region. For years, she has chosen discretion over applause. But tonight, she has agreed to stand before this city, not as a rumor, not as a signature on a donation, but as herself. Ladies and gentlemen, Evelyn Hartwell." Michael's champagneglas froze halfway to his lips. At first, he thought it was a coincidence. Then she stepped onto the stage. Not in a cotton dress, not with tired eyes from waiting up for a husband who came home smelling like someone else's perfume. Not as the woman he had dismissed. She wore deep emerald silk, simple but devastating. Her hair was swept back to reveal diamond earrings that caught the light like small stars. On her right hand was the old gold signet ring. The room rose to its feet. Applause thundered. Michael could not breathe. "Michael," Cassandra whispered, "is that—" "My wife," he said before he could stop himself. Cassandra's hand slipped from his arm. "Your ex-wife," she corrected, her voice suddenly cold. On stage, Evelyn spoke with quiet authority about the Foundation's new housing initiative, a medical fund for children, a business grant program for women rebuilding their lives after personal
and financial hardship. Every word struck Michael like a stone. He remembered the anonymous investor, the bank approval, the supplier call, the quiet confidence in Evelyn's eyes every time he had bragged about being self-made. A terrible understanding opened beneath his feet. He had not risen above her. He had been standing on ground she built.
He pushed through the crowd toward her. Evelyn turned, and for 1 second something old passed between them. A kitchen table, rain on a thin window, 2 young people eating noodles from chipped bowls. The memory was so vivid, Michael almost reached for it. Then it vanished. "Michael," she said. Not coldly. That made it worse. There was no anger in her voice, only distance. "I didn't know," he said. "No," she said. "You didn't. You should have told me." A few people nearby went still. Cassandra appeared behind him, her face tight with panic and calculation. Evelyn tilted her head slightly. "Would it have changed how you treated me?" Michael opened his mouth. No answer came, because all around him stood the truth. If he had known, he would have praised the same dresses he mocked. He would have called her modesty elegance. He would have mistaken his greed for love and expected reward for staying. Evelyn saw the answer anyway. "Enjoy the evening," she said, and turned away.
That should have been the end. But greed doesn't accept closed doors. It searches for windows, cracks, forgotten keys. Within 48 hours, Michael became obsessed, searching articles, filings, business records. Cassandra tried to convince him there was something he could use. "You were married to her. There must be property, shares, hidden assets, emotional damages, anything." He wanted to reject the idea, but his pride was bleeding. Everywhere he went, people looked at him differently. Men who had once admired him now smirked into their glasses. Someone at his club joked that Michael Hart had traded a kingdom for costume jewelry. He laughed along, then went home and smashed a glass against the wall. The following week, he filed a public lawsuit against Evelyn. Not quietly, publicly. It accused her of deception during their marriage, claiming she had hidden her wealth to manipulate him emotionally and financially, that he had been deprived of the lifestyle, opportunities, and marital benefits he would have received had he known her true identity. The tabloids devoured it. For 3 days, Evelyn said nothing. Her board begged her to respond. Her PR team prepared statements. Her lawyers smiled the patient smiles of people who knew they were holding winning cards. But what wounded Evelyn was not the lawsuit itself. It was the memory of Michael at 29, holding her hand in a hospital corridor after she had visited a dying employee. "You care too much," he had told her. She had leaned against his shoulder. "Someone has to." Back then he had kissed the top of her head. Now he was telling the world she had stolen his future because she hadn't handed him her fortune.
The night before the first hearing, Evelyn returned to the old apartment building where they had once lived. She still owned it, though Michael never knew. She stood outside beneath a flickering street lamp, looking up at the 3rd-floor window where they had spent their poorest, happiest year. She remembered rain leaking into a cooking pot on the floor. She remembered wrapping a towel around his shoulders. She remembered dancing barefoot to music from a cheap radio the night the electricity failed in half the apartment. "I'm going to be somebody," he had said. "You already are," she had answered. She wished he had believed her. Her oldest friend Nora was waiting in the car at the curb. "You don't have to be merciful," Nora said when Evelyn returned. Evelyn looked out the window. "I know." She touched the signet ring on her hand. "I know."
The hearing was brief and decisive. Evelyn's legal team presented prenuptial documents Michael had signed without reading carefully, because at the time he had believed she had nothing worth protecting. They showed that every anonymous investment in his businesses had come through independent channels with no legal claim attached. They showed Evelyn had never taken money from him, never blocked his opportunities, never asked for support. Then Evelyn's lead attorney placed one final folder before the judge. It contained records of Michael's recent attempts to contact Hartwell executives, offering private information about Evelyn in exchange for investment consideration. Emails, voice messages, a dinner meeting with a journalist where he had hinted he had damaging personal material if Hartwell refused to negotiate. Michael went pale. Cassandra stared at him. That part, apparently, she had not known. The judge dismissed Michael's claim and warned his legal team against further frivolous action. "Eve," Michael said softly as Evelyn gathered her papers. She stopped but did not turn. "I was angry." "Yes," she said. "I was humiliated." "Yes, I made a mistake." This time she looked back. "No, Michael, you made a choice, many of them." His face crumpled in a way that might once have broken her heart. "I loved you." Her gaze softened, and for a moment he thought he saw a door open. Then she said, "You loved who you thought I was when you believed I was useful, harmless, and beneath you. That was not love. That was comfort." She walked away before he could answer. What she did next, no one saw coming.
The city expected destruction. People assumed she would sue him into ruin, blacklist Cassandra, dismantle Michael's business piece by piece. Society expected a spectacle because betrayal always sells better when someone bleeds. Instead, Evelyn called a press conference at Hartwell Tower. Every major outlet came. Michael watched from his apartment, unshaven, surrounded by unopened mail, the ruins of his reputation. On screen, Evelyn stood before a backdrop bearing the Hartwell crest. "Over the past weeks, my private life has been made public in ways I would not have chosen. But if my pain must become part of this city's conversation, it will not be wasted." A reporter asked if she would take legal action against her former husband. "No," she said. The room stirred. "I will not spend my life punishing someone for failing to value me." Michael closed his eyes. For 1 second, he thought this was mercy. He thought perhaps he could call her later, apologize properly, appeal to the woman who used to leave soup outside a sick neighbor's door. Then Evelyn continued, "Today I am transferring $3 billion of my personal holdings into a new independent trust. The Hartwell Second Dawn Initiative will fund housing, education, legal support, and business grants for women and families rebuilding after betrayal, abandonment, financial control, or public humiliation." The room exploded with questions. Evelyn raised one hand. Silence returned slowly. "This initiative will not carry my former husband's name. It will not be about him. It will not be about revenge. It will be about every person who has ever been told they are less than they are." Michael stared at the screen. $3 billion. Not hidden, not hoarded, not weaponized against him. Released. Transformed. Made into something so large his insult looked ridiculous beside it.
Then Evelyn did the unimaginable. She invited Cassandra Vale to the stage. Michael stood so suddenly his chair fell backward. But Cassandra wasn't beside him in that apartment anymore. She had left before the announcement, and he hadn't even noticed. On screen, Cassandra stood near the podium, pale but composed. The diamonds and performance smiles gone. A simple black suit, hands clasped tightly in front of her. Evelyn looked at her, then back at the reporters. "Cassandra approached me privately last week. She told me the truth about certain communications and provided information relevant to my former husband's case. She also told me something else, that for much of her life, she believed security could only be found by attaching herself to powerful men." Cassandra's eyes lowered. "Many will expect me to shame her. I will not. Shame rarely teaches. Opportunity can." The cameras flashed wildly. "Ms. Vale has agreed to enter a leadership development program under the Second Dawn Initiative. She will begin not at the top, but in training, working alongside women who are building businesses from nothing. Whether she succeeds will depend entirely on her own character." Cassandra had not made Michael cruel. She had only revealed what already lived inside him. Evelyn understood that distinction. It was why she could extend a hand without compromising her integrity. Michael called Evelyn 17 times after the press conference. She did not answer. He sent flowers to Hartwell Tower. They were returned.
He wrote a long email filled with apologies and memories and desperate promises, invoking the old apartment, the rain, the woman she had been before all this. He said he wanted to start again. Evelyn read it once, then she archived it. The Second Dawn Initiative became more than a headline. It opened offices across the city. Women received grants to start bakeries, repair shops, childcare centers, design studios, technology companies. Families moved into safe housing. Students returned to school. Legal clinics stayed open late into the night. On the wall of the first Second Dawn office, Evelyn placed a small framed sentence in her grandfather's handwriting. Money is a mirror. People often stopped to read it. Few knew what it meant to her. Michael's life narrowed. Investors withdrew. His club membership was quietly suspended. Invitations vanished. Cassandra built a new life without him. Slowly, one uncomfortable day at a time, in rooms where nobody cared how beautiful she was. One afternoon, almost a year after the divorce, Michael walked past a Second Dawn marketplace downtown. Dozens of small businesses had set up tents beneath a white canopy. The street was crowded with customers, music, children, the warm smell of fresh bread. He saw Evelyn near the center of it all, not on a stage, not surrounded by security or reporters. She was helping an elderly woman adjust a display of handmade scarves. For a moment, he saw the woman from the kitchen again. The woman who had believed in him. The woman who had said he was already somebody. But this time the memory didn't comfort him. It judged him. A little girl ran up to Evelyn and handed her a paper crown made of yellow construction paper. Evelyn laughed and placed it on her head with the gravity of a queen accepting gold. Everyone around her clapped. Michael stood at the edge of the crowd, unseen. He finally understood the part that hurt most. Evelyn had not become powerful after he left. She had always been powerful. Her wealth was only the smallest piece of it. He turned away before she could notice him, or perhaps she had noticed and simply chosen not to look. Years later, the city would still tell this story. Some told it as gossip about the foolish man who left the wealthiest woman in town. Some told it as a warning about greed. Some told it as proof that quiet women should never be underestimated. But those who truly understood told it differently. They said Evelyn Hartwell had been handed betrayal and could have turned it into destruction. Instead, she turned it into doors. She could have used her fortune to make one man pay. She used it to help thousands rise. She could have let humiliation define her. She made it the foundation of something stronger than pride. And Michael became a footnote in a story he once believed was entirely about him. As for Evelyn, she returned one evening to the old apartment building, now restored and converted into transitional housing for women starting over. Rain tapped against the windows just as it had years ago. In the third-floor kitchen, a young mother stood stirring soup while her son drew pictures at the table. The ceiling no longer leaked. The lights no longer flickered. Evelyn watched from the doorway with quiet satisfaction. Nora stood beside her. "Do you ever regret hiding who you were?" Evelyn thought about Michael, about Cassandra, about her grandfather, about the girl she had been who believed love could remain pure if money never touched it. Then she looked at the child, laughing over his drawing, safe and warm, because pain had been turned into shelter. "No," Evelyn said softly. "If I had not hidden my name, I might never have learned my worth had nothing to do with it." Outside, the rain washed the city clean. For the first time in a long time, Evelyn did not feel like a woman who had lost something. She felt like a woman who had finally been returned to herself. Here is the thing I keep coming back to in this story. Evelyn's grandfather said money is a mirror. It doesn't change people, it reveals them. Michael's true character wasn't revealed by wealth. It was revealed by the slow accumulation of small choices. Who to correct in public, who to leave behind at dinner parties, who to call an upgrade when standing in his own living room with 2 suitcases. Wealth was just a lens that made it clear enough to see. The people who dismissed Evelyn because she drove a 12-year-old sedan and made her own coffee, they weren't making a mistake about money.
They were making a mistake about character, hers and their own.
The most powerful thing Evelyn did in this entire story wasn't transferring $3 billion. It was deciding what that money was for. Not punishment, not performance, not proof of anything to anyone who had ever doubted her. Just doors, open for people who needed them. That's what her grandfather had spent his life building, and that's what she carried forward. Not his name, but his understanding of what wealth is actually for. If this story found you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe and stay with us. The next one is already on its way.